what do the police do? Like with all that money, 226 million, what is the police's primary objective as they state it in the city?
I mean, well, as they state it, right, to protect and to serve. Um, I think that one of the big like misunderstandings sometimes is that they serve a preventative function with crime. And there are studies that are kind of all over the place on like whether or not that's true and true at different periods and in different places. But the majority of what they do is actually respond to crimes after crimes have been committed, right? And even going beyond that, over 80% of the calls that police respond to have to do with traffic. And that's in like every city everywhere, right? So the majority have to do with traffic accidents and traffic situations. So it's actually a very small percentage, even of the remaining 20%, that have to do with things that people ascribe to police as being there to prevent or to respond to, like violent crimes and those sorts of things.
Right. And so I wanted to pull up real quick. So this that I've got pulled up on the screen for those that can see it is kind of what the city, they call it their progress indicators. And so it talks about like what percentage of crimes are cleared by arrests or prosecution, what percentage of like property crimes. And some of these numbers to me don't make a ton of sense. But I find it interesting that like out of the police calls, like the type of crimes that most people would like be the most concerned about, the police solve relatively few of them. So like property crimes, like less than a third of all property crimes are ever solved or even really dealt with, which is like what a lot of people think of, I think, when they think of crimes. And so, I mean, I guess let's talk about that. Like, I mean, how are you guys seeing the kind of the efficacy here of all this money we're spending?
Well, just to point out real quick, so one of the things that I found interesting is that out of these progress indicators, the five here that you point out on those progress indicators about people feeling safe and then clearance of the different crimes are the only categories where they cite a source. And I think it's interesting to look at those sources. So it might be kind of down that next page. So there are these resident survey results, and I cannot for the life of me find who administers those, who goes about actually collecting this data, where does this come from? And also the second one, which I think is a little more serious, is that we have the percentage of property crimes cleared, percentage of person crimes cleared. And we have in the columns up there, right, the fiscal year 2018 actual numbers, fiscal year 19 actual, and then projections here. And the second thing cited here, if you see, is based on 2018 statistics from latest available data published by the FBI, which makes me wonder, where are you getting the actual 2019 numbers from? Because that doesn't seem to really line up. And also, why are you needing to quote the FBI stats since all of these should be in-house already? So I'm a little bit, I find that a little problematic, to say the least. Or at least I have questions. There we go. And again, with you, Nick, I would say too, some of the numbers throughout these progress indicators are all over the place. And I don't know why. I mean, there might be explanations for every one of them, but I, for the life of me, can't come up with any.
That's something I see a lot when I'm looking at these budget numbers, is just there's more questions than answers at the end of it. You know, I'm looking through these categories. So to kind of get a little bit high level again to the first part of your question of, how is the police spending the money, and then to go back into what is the efficacy of that. Well, the police put together a little, packet, just like every department does every year, that has their budget proposal. This is information that you can get on the City of OKC's website under their department budget. So it's very accessible. Anybody can look at this. But the problem with that is when you look at it, again, you become more curious. I have more questions. So the police determine that the way that they're spending the budget is through four categories, main categories: administration, investigations, operations, and public safety support. So when you're going through this, you would imagine, okay, well, if we're really trying to be as efficient and as effective as possible with the way these tax dollars are being spent, you would hope that a lot of that would be going to such things such as public safety support and some of these components, investigations, et cetera. But with the numbers like what we're hearing so far, where the numbers aren't making sense or the data just isn't there, you're looking through these things and you can just come up with more questions. So I'd encourage everybody, do that. Look at the budget, see what questions you have, because the more people are looking at this, the more things that the police have to be accountable for, and we just need to keep asking for that information. Now, my other kind of caveat about the efficacy here is that in their administration section of the police budget, we actually have a program that they call the Executive Leadership Program. So this program is supposed to provide planning, management, administrative, and reporting services to department employees and city leaders so they can achieve strategic goals and key results. So if we're thinking about measurable results and the efficacy of measurable results, you would think we would have a lot more of those. So we wouldn't have these questions about where is the data coming from, who did the survey, why don't these numbers line up? Well, another big question I look at when I see this page, the second pillar, like it's a few pages in here to this document, is that the executive leadership line item in this section of their budget, there's 48 staff positions, and they're spending over $18 million on this program. So my questions are, who are these people? Where is the numbers? Where is the data? I'm really curious to know how to track this information down, because, I want to make sure that the police is spending the money the way they say they are, and that it is providing true, effective results for our community. That only helps the police as much as it helps us. But my questions, again, are, where is the data? And if it's out there, we need a lot more of it for these numbers to start making sense.
And what programs what programs does that money go toward? Because if it's towards staffing, we're talking about 48 people making just about $400,000 a year each otherwise. So I'm kind of, what exactly does that mean? And why don't we have tons of data, going back a few years as well?
Yeah, I mean, when you watch these budget presentations as they happen, I mean, they're very well polished and sort of tell a very specific narrative. And when you have this large a team kind of helping craft it, you would hope that it'd be a lot more heavy on how we could do better and why we're getting these sorts of critiques as far as low clearance rates or high numbers of police killings. You would think they'd have time to investigate some of that and provide better answers than just sort of a well-managed PowerPoint or an early released video like they did a couple months back about the protest last summer that was nonsense, and just clearly pulled out of somewhere. So yeah, I'm going through. I've got the deal up. Do you just want to keep going through kind of the different headings, because the administration one. So next one down on here is investigations.
Mm-hmm. So my questions here, okay, if I'm just looking at these numbers just as numbers, I'm really not even asking questions yet, but the executive leadership positions, we said there's about 48 that they're presenting for an $18 million part of their budget. Well, in investigations, which we might argue, since all of these things, we have these missing, these things are not being solved, right? The crimes are not being solved. So why does investigations have 143 positions for just $1 million more than that executive leadership program. So you're staffing 3 times as many people for the same amount of money. And again, maybe this is just, I don't know what's going on with this executive leadership program. There might be something that we've just never heard of. I've never heard of this program. So for it to be having, a large chunk of the budget designated to it as it is a little, I've got a lot of questions there. But then to turn around and see that the very next section of the police budget, investigations, we're allocating, investigations gets 19, almost $20 million, and then special investigations we're looking at $11 million, and the total positions. Oh, and then support. So what exactly does support mean? I'd really want to see some job descriptions here. There's a handful of people that called in during the summer to talk about some of these things, and they mentioned, and this is really important, this is the work that I do with small businesses, the way you write your job description changes a lot. The responsibilities you give to somebody can really help make them or break them in how they conduct their business. And we all know that we've got a lot of big questions around the training and culture of the police department. There's a lot of logistical operational things they can put into place in some of these sections that can really help not only the police, but for the citizens of Oklahoma City to know what these police department people should be accountable for and how to support them in that. So if I'm looking at this, my total investigations staffing, they're staffing about 300 people for $40 million, which, great, that's a lot of jobs. That's really important and really exciting. But again, what's happening here? If these data points are not showing up and aligning with what this budget says it should be, then we're clearly needing to move some money in a different direction that might actually support the police department in a way that can help them achieve better statistics and goals.
Well, and to look at a couple under the investigation sections with the progress indicators, line 42, number of crime lab tests conducted. Now, I know that can change from year to year based on several things, but between 2018 and 2019, you have almost 20,000 more crime lab tests conducted. At the very least, give me a footnote about that. That's sort of, that might need to be explained, right? But even more serious, to my mind, drop down to line 47, percentage of graffiti crimes cleared by arrest. 132% of graffiti crimes were cleared by arrest. 2019, even better, 194% of graffiti crimes were cleared by arrest. I have no idea what that means. Were these graffiti crimes in 2 dimensions? I don't understand how you clear more than 100%. That seems, I don't know what that means. I need some clarification.
Yeah, lots of questions.
Well, and then it's worth pointing out that with investigations, I mean, and Ron mentions it in chat, the narrative that the police are preventing crime is false. They're coming after the fact and maybe talking to you about your crime and in lower numbers of cases solving it. So it's maybe instead of coming after the fact, what if we were doing more at the front end to prevent crime or to help, disrupt these systems that lead to criminal activity? And so I think that's kind of the big missing piece.
There are a few other things too that are, I think, much more straightforward that I don't understand why sometimes numbers are missing. So the next part of the budget being the operations section. If you go down to the court enforcement and investigations, for some reason, the year 2018, we don't have the number for percent of total warrants cleared of the total received. We don't even have the number of warrants cleared by officers or received by officers. That's just not there. And I kind of wonder, why. It seems to me you should probably keep all of those for years past anyway. But why would you not be able to find that out for, just back in 2018?
Yeah, it wasn't exactly the pre-computer age there.
Right.
To your point, Nick, I think, one of the big things that I see in Oklahoma City is that we need better streets. We have some programs that will help us with that. Better Streets, Safer City. Did you know that, what is it? Josh, you might help me find the number. There's like $9 million. Maybe that's too high. There's a lot of money from Better Streets, Safer City going to the police this year. So if that's the case, why are we also still spending, another $15 million on traffic safety? Is there something we can do here to help, if I know that I can put in a street enhancement on 23rd Street for $5 million and it can change the nature of how people engage with the street, then I know I can do a lot with $5 million. But that would actually, again, help mitigate some of these needs for uniformed officers to seek traffic, calls. So what, I don't have those numbers with me. I know one of you guys do, but there are large numbers that are just traffic. Uniformed officers are being sent on calls to deal with traffic concerns. And if we have a city that is built for people to engage with it at all levels, including pedestrian safety, we won't have as many of these traffic concerns and can mitigate so many of these calls that come in and never get answered, quite frankly.
So Better Streets, Safer Cities, which let me just explain that for folks that may not understand it, was an extension. Well, it was a number of things. I think it was partly a city bond issue. There was also an extension of the MAPS 1 cent sales tax for like 18 months, 21 months, something like that, a couple years. And then there was also a 1/4 cent public safety tax that got split between police and fire. So it actually increased Oklahoma City's sales tax rate. They bundled it all into one campaign and just said, "Hey, vote yes on all this stuff." But it was a very slick sleight of hand by the chamber and the folks that kind of run things because they wanted the MAPS tax extended and they knew people wanted better streets. So they also, in order to get public safety on board so that police and fire didn't oppose it or didn't speak out about it, they also and they had some needs, I guess, in the budget that weren't getting addressed. They also threw in an increase in the sales tax for it. I mean, whether or not that needed to happen, especially now as we start delving into this budget and can't even answer like basic questions about how the police are spending money. And of course, in light of the recent protests and concerns around police violence, I don't know. I mean, it really felt like it was just a very small number of political players getting together being like, hey, we need to sort this out and here's how we're going to do it, as opposed to any sort of like data-driven or even citizen-driven process. I mean, other than the streets part, like, yes, every survey says Oklahoma City has terrible roads and we want better ones. But the public safety thing very much felt like sort of added on after the fact.